Hi there, today we're going to be solving with variables on both sides. We're adding on another step to our equations unit here. All right, our steps are, step one, we are going to simplify each side of the equation. Simplify each side of the equation. And what we mean by that is, don't forget your distributive property first. So look for those parentheses, and I'm going to abbreviate here. And then combine like terms if you can. Combine like terms. And again, I'm going to abbreviate. So look for that distributive property, look for like terms. Step two, you're going to move all the variables to one side. So you're going to move variables to one side, constants to the other side. Step three, you're going to solve the remaining two-step equation. Solve the remaining two-step equation. All right, so let's look at example one. Example one, I'm going to draw my line down my equal sign so I can see the two different sides of my equation. Step one says to simplify each side of the equation. Well, I notice if I look at the left side, I don't have distributive property and I don't have like terms. If I look at the right side, no distributive property and no like terms. So I can move on to step two. Step two is move all variables to one side. I typically like to move the smallest variable term so I can avoid negatives if I can. So I'm going to move this 3x. And what we mean by move the variables is get rid of them from one side. So to make 3x 0, I have to subtract 3x. And remember, whatever you do to one side, you're going to do to the other. So I'm going to subtract 3x over here also. And notice I'm lining up the 3x with the 5x on the left side because I can subtract those like terms. So I'm going to take 3x minus 3x, that gives me 0. And on the left side, I have 5x minus 3x, which is 2x. I'm going to bring down this plus 2 on the left side, along with my equal sign. And on the right side, negative 4 is left. So at this point, I have a two-step equation. I have 2x plus 2 equals negative 4. I apologize. I know that's really hard to read. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. I get 2x equals, I have negatives plus more negatives gives me even more negatives. 4 plus 2 is 6. I'm going to divide by 2. And I get x equals negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So my answer for number 1 is x equals negative 3. Go ahead and pause the video and you try number 2. All right, number 2, there's a lot of negatives in here. Hopefully those didn't mess you up at all. I'm going to notice that I don't have to simplify on either side. So I can move on to step 2, which is move my variables. And I like to move this negative 7, and I'm going to move that by adding 7y to both sides. On the right side, those cancel, and I'm left with negative 43. On the left side, negative 3 and a positive 7. When I have different signs, I subtract. So 7 minus 3 is 4. I notice I have more positives than I do negatives, so it's going to be a positive 4. I'm going to bring down this minus 3. Next, I have a two-step equation. I can add 3. Bring down my 4y because those 3's cancel. Negative 43 and a positive 3, I have to subtract. And I have more negatives than I do positives, so it's going to be a negative 40. And divide by your coefficient, 4. And I get y equals negative 10. So number 2, you should have gotten y equals negative 10. All right, great. We're going to skip down a little bit. Let's see. Ooh, I like number 7. Let's look at number 7. Number 7, I do not have to simplify either side because I do not have the distributive property on either side. I don't have like terms on either side. So I need to move on to step 2 and move my variable terms. Now, I notice that I have a variable term and a constant term on the left and just a variable term on the right. So I'm going to move my variable term that's on the left over to the right because I have something on the left also. So I'm going to move this 13y by subtracting 13y. I know why sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Subtract 13y. And I'm left with 3 on the left side. Over here, 3y. I'm going to divide by 3. I don't have a 2-step equation this time. It's just a 1-step. And I get y equals 1. Y equals 1. Now, I want to show you what would happen if you didn't remember to, here's this. If you didn't remember to move that 13y and instead you moved this 16y. Let me show you what would happen. Okay, let's say I moved 16y instead. Over here on the right side, I have 16y minus 16y. That gives me 0. I need a number over here on the right side, so I have to actually write down that 0 instead of just crossing out 16y and 16y. On the left side, I would get a negative 3y plus 3. Now I can subtract my 3, my constant term, from both sides. I get negative 3y equals 0 minus 3 is negative 3. Divide by negative 3, and again I get y equals 1. So I should get the same answer either way I do it. Let's move on now to number 9. Let's look at number 9. Here's where our first step comes in, because I notice I have the distributive property on both sides. So I'm going to distribute this 6 to m. I get 6m. 6 times negative 1 gives me negative 6. Break down my equal sign. And over here on the right side, I'm going to distribute also. 3 times 3m is 9m. And 3 times 5 is 15. So now I have an equation that I've been doing up above, like the number 1 and number 2. So now I can move my variable terms. And I'm going to move this 6m only because it's smaller than 9m. And I'm moving it by subtracting it. Positive 6m minus 6m gives me 0. And that's what I want. I'm going to bring down this negative 6. 9m minus 6m gives me 3m. And I'm going to bring down positive 15. Now I have a 2-step equation. Subtract 15. I get 3m on this side because the 15s cancel. On the left side, I have negatives and more negatives. So I get even more negatives. with a negative 21. I'm adding those. Divide by 3. I get m equals negative 7. M equals negative 7. Go ahead and pause the video and you try number 10. For number 10, you needed to distribute this 3 and get 15x plus 6. On the right side, distribute the 2. I get 6x minus 12, and that's minus 12 because I have a negative 6 times 2, which gives me a negative 12. Next, I'm going to move my variable terms. I get 9x plus 6 equals negative 12. I have a two-step equation. Subtract 6. I get 9x equals, negative 18. Divide by 9. You should have gotten x equals negative 2. All right, we have one more example, and that is number 11. Number 11, we don't have the distributive property, but I do see that I have some like terms. I have like terms on the left side, 16w minus 2w. So I can combine those before I start moving any variables over that equal sign, over that line. So 16 minus 2w is 14w. And on the right side, I don't have like terms, so I'm just going to copy that down. And this is very similar to our problem that we did up here, number 7, where we have a variable term on one side and along with a constant, and then just a variable term. So I would like to move my variables over to one side and just keep my constant term on the right. So I'm going to move 21w, and I get 14 over here because my 21w's cancel. And over here, I'm going to subtract 14 minus 21w gives me a negative 7w. I'm going to divide by negative 7, and I get w equals negative 2. Go ahead and pause the video and you try our final example, number 12. We have some like terms that we need to put together. So 21 and 9 are like terms because they don't have variables. They are constant terms. On the right side, I have 10p minus 3p. That gives me 7p. Notice I did not write that down. I did not show that work. I did that work in my head. I did 3p minus 7p in my head, and I wrote down 3p minus, 10p minus 3p in my head, and I wrote down the answer. All right, next, I'm going to move my variable terms because both sides are simplified. So I'm going to move 7p by subtracting it. On the right side, they cancel. I get negative 10. On the left side, they cancel. I get 30. Notice I have 30 equals negative 10. Is that true? I don't think 30 will ever equal negative 10. So it is not equal. And this is what we would call a no solution answer. A no solution answer means that there will never be a number that we can substitute for p in this equation and it will work. There's not a single number that I can substitute for p. All right, thank you.